In this digital world of ours, how do we actually keep our information safe? From your own personal data to the deepest secrets of giant corporations, there's this constant battle going on behind the scenes. Today, we're going to decode digital defense and break down the real strategies that protect us all. So here's how we're going to tackle this. We're breaking it down into 6 logical layers. I want you to think of it like peeling an onion. Each layer we pull back reveals a deeper level of how our digital world stays protected. We'll kick things off with the core principles and build our way up to what's next in the future of defense.
Okay, let's start at the very beginning. Before we get into all the cool tech, firewalls, encryption, all that stuff, we have to ask a really fundamental question. What is information security actually trying to do?
And it turns out pretty much everything boils down to just 3 key concepts. This foundation is so central to the entire industry that it has its own famous name, the CIA triad. And no, not that CIA.
Okay, so here it is. It all comes down to these 3 pillars. First, you've got confidentiality, which is pretty simple, right? It just means keeping secrets secret. Then there's integrity, which is all about making sure data is accurate and trustworthy, that no one's messed with it. And finally, availability, which means that data is there for you right when you need it. Just about every security tool we're going to talk about today serves at least one of these big 3 goals.
All right, so we've got our goals from the CIA triad. But how does a big company actually create a plan? I mean, you can't just start throwing up digital walls all over the place, right? You need a blueprint. And that's exactly where security frameworks come into the picture. Now, it's super important to get this. These aren't programs you just install. They're more like comprehensive playbooks, the actual architectural blueprints for building security. Frameworks like the global ISO standard or the one from the US government called NIST, they provide a really structured, logical roadmap for building a system that can actually stand up to attacks.
So we've got our goals, we've picked a blueprint, now we have to deal with what's often the trickiest part of any system: people. This brings us to the next huge question. Who is actually allowed to do what inside the system? Who gets the keys?
The answer is a whole field called Identity and Access Management, or IAM for short. The best way to think of it is as the digital keymaster for an entire organization. It's in charge of the master list of every single user and exactly what they're allowed to touch. It decides who gets in the front door and who gets the keys to the most sensitive rooms. And then, inside the world of IAM, there's an even more specialized, high-stakes area called PAM, Privileged Access Management. This is laser-focused on just those few, ultra-powerful admin accounts. You know, the ones that hold the keys to the entire kingdom. PAM is all about putting those accounts under the tightest security imaginable.
So how does this work in practice? Well, it usually follows a pretty simple process that we call AAA. First up is authentication. That's you proving you are who you say you are, maybe with a password or your Face ID. Next is authorization. Once the system knows who you are, it checks its list to see what you're actually allowed to do. And finally, there's accounting, where the system logs everything you did, which creates a super important audit trail. All of this points to a massive fundamental shift in how we think about security. The old model was basically a castle with a moat. Once you were inside the walls, you were pretty much trusted. But the new model? It's called Zero Trust. And the name really says it all. It assumes no one and no device is trustworthy by default. Every single request to access anything has to be proven and verified every single time.
Okay, so we've covered identity. Now let's talk about protecting the network itself. The digital highways all our data travels on. This is where we start building the walls and the checkpoints to keep the bad guys out. So what are we actually defending against? Well, this might surprise you. We all picture shadowy hackers trying to break in from the outside, right? But look at this. A staggering 90% of security incidents involve an insider, someone already inside the walls, whether it's through a simple mistake or on purpose. And that is exactly why a single wall is never enough. You need layers. Your first line of defense is usually something called a next-generation firewall, or NGFW. Think of it like a really intelligent security guard posted at your network's border. It doesn't just check IDs. It can actually look inside the packages of data, inspecting the content of the traffic and looking for anything suspicious before it lets it through. But what happens when you're not inside the castle walls? What if you're working from a coffee shop, using their public Wi-Fi? That's where a VPN comes in.
A VPN, or virtual private network, is like creating your own private, armored tunnel for your data to travel through the public internet. It encrypts everything, making sure your connection is confidential no matter where you are.
But let's be real for a second. What happens if an attacker does get past the perimeter? Or what if that insider we talked about makes a simple, honest mistake? Well, the next layer of security doesn't even rely on walls. It's all about protecting the actual data, no matter where it goes. So we've talked about building that strong wall, that perimeter around your digital castle. But like we just saw, threats can absolutely come from the inside. And that's why just protecting the network isn't enough. You have to protect the crown jewels, the data itself.
And this is where something called data loss prevention, or DLP, comes in. If the firewall is the guard at the front gate, think of DLP as a totally different kind of guard, one who checks everything leaving the castle. DLP tools are smart enough to scan outgoing emails and files to automatically spot and block sensitive info from leaking out, whether it was an accident or not.
And finally, we have the ultimate safeguard, encryption. This is basically the art of scrambling data into a secret code. The beauty of it is, if a file that's encrypted gets stolen, it's just a bunch of useless gibberish to the thief. It's completely unreadable without the one unique digital key that can unlock it. So, where is this all headed? Because the world of digital defense is absolutely not static. It's more like a constant, high-stakes game of cat and mouse, where both sides are always evolving to face new and, honestly, more sophisticated challenges.
There are a few huge trends on the horizon. For one, AI and machine learning are being used to automate threat detection, letting systems respond way faster than any human ever could. We're also getting ready for quantum computers, which are a future threat that could potentially break the encryption we rely on today. And that zero trust idea? It's expanding to cover everything everywhere, from our phones to the cloud.
And that leaves us with one crucial, final thought. As more and more of our lives are built on this foundation of digital trust, this core idea of never trust, always verify is going to impact every single one of us. If there's one thing you take away from this, it's that modern digital defense isn't a static wall you build once. It's a dynamic, intelligent, and constant process of verification.